Hello and welcome to another episode of Get the Boots, the podcast that is all about grabbing opportunities, overcoming challenges, and saying yes to your story. I'm Stephanie, your host, and I talk to people from all over the world about their life stories and how they have braved and survived difficult situations, changes, and transitions, whether voluntarily or because life made them. Today's guest is one of those people who said yes to her story. I'm talking to Louise, originally from Sweden, who has lived in the Canary Islands for the last 25 years. I wonder if I should say on the Canary Islands or in. With a background in psychology and communication and fascinated by anything to do with languages, Louise brought up her own children speaking 3 languages and at some point even ran a school for expat Swedish children in Lanzarote. She now runs her own business as a multilingual virtual assistant. So let's find out why and how she made this life happen. Let's hear Louise's story. It's lovely to have you here today. Welcome to Get the Boots, Louise. I just realized you are my first Swede on the podcast. I haven't had any Swedes yet. So yeah, I'm just, as I was making my coffee this morning, I was going through the list of nationalities that have been on the podcast. And yeah, so it's a premiere. Although you're not.
Premiere, oh, how wonderful.
You're not in Sweden, are you?
No, I'm not.
Why don't you tell us where you are and we'll jump right into your story.
Yeah. All right. So officially I'm in Spain, but I'm not really in Spain. Let me explain. I'm in the Canary Islands, which is a small group of islands just off the coast of Africa that belong to Spain. But geographically, we're not so near. We're, I don't know, what are we, 2.5 hours away on a flight from Spain? So not really near.
I'm very jealous. I got back from Europe last week and landed in deepest winter.
Oh, dear. Well, we have winter as well. We've only got about 17 degrees. That's cold.
Don't even.
So, and you have to translate that for your American friends because they don't do Celsius like we do.
That's right. That is 62 Fahrenheit. But you know, I don't. Still, after 16 years in the US, I still don't do Fahrenheit. I have to admit, I'm terrible with numbers. So that's always my excuse. And it's just something that
as well
won't go into my head. And when someone says to me, oh, it's in the 70s, then I know that's a nice warm day, but that's about it. I can't do the calculations. So
talking of numbers, and I'll tell you something weird that Swedish people do. And this is like law. You have to go by this. You have to know which number of week it is all the time.
What like in the year?
Has 52. Yeah, you know how the year has 52 weeks, and they go, "Oh, when is your holiday? Oh, it's in week 26." And I'm like, "Week 26? That doesn't tell me anything." Well, I can work it out. It's like the 6 months kind of period. But you know, it's always talking the meeting. Oh, let's have a meeting in week 14, and the kids' holiday is in the break. And you have to know what week that is. So I have actually acquired a Swedish calendar just to be able to communicate with my Swedish clients so that I can know that we are in week 9 now, just to tell you.
that's the sort of thing, that's the sort of detail I love. Because this is the thing you never know, as you know, when you learn a foreign language or every country has those weird little things that nobody else does. I mean,
exactly.
Good to know, I guess.
Swedish, very well organized and planned out. And you also have to plan many months in advance for everything. So you can't just spontaneously. And then I moved to Spain, which is the opposite completely, where mañana, tomorrow, can mean any day, really. It doesn't really mean tomorrow. It means another day.
How was that for you? Because clearly that must have, because you've been there for quite a while now, haven't you?
25 years now, yeah.
So there must have been something in that sort of more mañana attitude that spoke to you.
Yes, I think there are so many layers to this. I don't even know how to peel this onion. That is me. First of all, I was never a very good Swede. So, like I said, weak numbers never really spoke to me. So I was probably never really established as a Swede from that context. But then also there was when I moved here, it was actually at the back end of having gone through a burnout, professionally and personally. I had gone through a divorce and I had burnt out at work, and it was just basically not a very good year. So I had been on a sick leave for a very long time. And I remember speaking to the therapist that the company gave me to try and ease me back into work. I said, I don't know what to do. Is my life going to be like that? And he said, well, you need to decide whether your life is going to be like that. And I was like, darn, I have to do it myself again.
So that was in Sweden.
That was in Sweden, but that was that was what started me changing my life around and moving abroad. I moved to England first. That wasn't very good because when you're suffering from stress and you move to London, which I did, it wasn't really the best environment for me, as you can imagine. So I didn't last very long there. But then I went on holiday a couple of times here to Lanzarote, which is the name of the island where I am. It's a very small island. And I thought to myself, God, this is paradise. It's so calm here. There's no rush. Everybody takes it easy and slow. And as it happened, I met a man. So it's the traditional of love brought me here. But even if that love is long gone, then I'm still here. So the love for the island continued, and the love for the lifestyle that I could give myself here. So those first years, I didn't think so much about the difference in being the culture shock as such, because I was just welcoming it, because I was just so happy that it was like that, because it helped me heal much quicker.
Yeah.
Then there was a few years when I had to kind of establish myself here, working wise, bringing up children, all of that, where all of a sudden it became really frustrating. And it's a bit like, how on earth can we run a society like this? If the
Swedish genes kicked in.
They kicked in big time, and I was just like, I had to. We say in Sweden we have to swallow a camel. I had to swallow so many camels because it was just not. I couldn't do anything to change it. I had to accept how it was.
Yeah. So honeymoon phase was, this lifestyle is so much better for my mental health. And then reality kicks in. And I imagine that is the thing when because I always find you go on holiday somewhere and then you relax because you're on holiday, the sun is shining and all that kind of thing. But where do you make that distinction where it's like, well, is this really sustainable? Can I really live here? Is this not just this, anywhere is better than back home kind of feeling? And then, so how long did it take you to decide, okay, I really want to stay here. I really want to give this a go?
Kind of didn't have a choice because, as I said, I had children with a man who lived here. He wasn't from here, but he lived here and he was established here. And the children also had their grandparents on his mum and dad lived here as well. So it felt quite drastic if I was going to move back with two little children,
Yeah.
to split up the family, because I knew he wasn't going to come with me. So that would be, so first it was like no choice, but I always say there's a line somewhere around 5 years. When you've been somewhere for 5 years, that's when you really start to feel, I do live here now.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the plan from the beginning was like that. I always, the first couple of years, I thought, well, it's actually paradise. It's great for the kids. It's safe, so safe. We have lots of nature. Everything is free when you go out in the nature, So you don't need much money. You can spend a lot of time with your young children, which was amazing to be able to see them actually grow up and not just put them into daycare. And all of that was very positive things. But I did have in the back of my head that when they hit teenagers, I'm not so sure that it's such a good place anymore because there's too little to do. It's too small.
It's an island. And yes, and coming from say a more driven, more career focused country as well. And so it's like, it's hard to shake that off.
Yeah.
I mean, I found even being in the UK, sometimes you felt the island mentality.
Exactly. You can imagine it feels how island mentality hits you when you're on an island that's like 60k long and 20k wide.
Absolutely. But then at the same time, your children grew up there. So it's not like they knew any different.
Exactly. So even if I had that in the back of my head that, well,
Mhm.
when they're a bit older, we're going to start thinking about maybe not moving back to Sweden, but maybe moving to the peninsula, the mainland Spain, where there are more cities and more opportunities for them. But years go and you have your job and they have their school and
Yeah, of
you
course.
come to a
You're
certain stage
established. You
where,
have,
yeah, you're established and I have friends here. I've
yes,
built
of
myself
course.
a life here with very good friends. And what would you do if you just started over again somewhere? And would the children even appreciate it? Probably
Yeah.
not, because they don't want to move.
Yes, of course. How can I
So
ask how old they are now?
now they are 24 and 20.
Okay, and where are they?
They are officially both here, but they have
Okay.
been and gone. The oldest one has moved to Sweden. She lived there for
Hmm.
8 months. She wanted to try it. She's lived in mainland. She's been in Italy for a couple of months, but she's back here now, and she seems to be quite happy to be
Yeah.
back here. She
Yeah.
came back and she said, "You know what? I've always thought that it was rubbish in Lanzarote, as in there isn't anything here." But she said, "I've tested a few cities now, and the quality of
Hmm.
life here is
Yeah.
actually
Yes.
one of a kind." Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think she's going to stay. The other one, she's 20 and she's just now doing an Erasmus study exchange.
Hmm.
So she's in Croatia for 6 months. But she has always been, there's a saying in here in in Spanish, but it's definitely in Canarian that soy del pueblo. I'm from the village, so she
Hmm.
is very pueblo material. She's when she was
But
little,
that's
she just wanted to
lovely.
work at the school, her,
Yeah.
junior
Yeah.
school and work there and never leave the village basically.
Yeah. That must have been quite interesting for you as well, as someone who has moved and kind of gone, and then to have children who are so rooted in a place.
Yeah, yeah. But even if they are rooted, they are very international citizens. What do you call it? Global citizen.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
way, they are third culture kids, even if they don't probably would say that they are because they feel completely Spanish. But I think I might have told you this before. We did that experiment. Well, I did some kind of personal experiment with my children. It was awful. It wasn't an experiment. It was more like a observation
Hmm.
where I asked them when they were little what they felt their nationality was.
Yeah.
Because they have a Swedish mother, they have an English father, a British father, and they are born in Spain
Hmm.
and grew up in Spain. So I think the first time I asked them, maybe they were about, I don't know, 6 and 10 or something like that. And I said to them, what do you feel like you are out of those three? And they're like, English, British. I'm like, really? I found that very strange because we have had hardly ever been to Britain to visit. Yes, they did have their grandparents here who were British. We
Hmm.
did speak English a lot at home. And I think that's what made it happen for them because English became the family language.
I can see that because the family language is so strong. We have the same
Yeah,
situation here, although my children would never say that they're British, I don't think. But it's a dominant factor, and especially when they're
yeah,
small, when they're young, because they still haven't been exposed so much to they grow up in this environment, but they're not, those first few years where they're not really part of the bigger society. The family is the nuclear
exactly.
influence, really. And then so that
Yeah.
kind of makes sense. And you say that the grandparents are in Lanzarote as well.
Not anymore, but they were when they were little. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And but the thing
absolutely
is,
dominant.
it
Yeah.
does change. They do start school very early here, so they start
Hmm.
actual school when they're three only here. So
Hmm.
they were in Spanish school from when they were three. So
Hmm.
you thought that they had seen enough of the Spanish side of it as well. But the family language, when
Wow.
you're young, I suppose, still take dominance
Yeah.
over the other. But I did ask them a couple of years ago because I was invited to write an article for a Swedish
Hmm.
paper or expat Swedes. And I wrote about identity and language because I think that is super interesting.
Yeah.
So I asked them again. And I even asked them if they remembered that I had asked them before, and they did. But I said, well, would you change it now? And they said, yeah, we're definitely Spanish now.
Yeah. Interesting. So now, so in their 20s, basically, that's where identity has probably solidified to some extent. And I mean, at least
Yeah,
they think it has, because I think it still changes all the time, doesn't it?
exactly.
But
Yeah, he never really
that's
stops.
interesting.
No.
And then did you ask them when
Mm.
they were like teenagers? Because that would be interesting as well. Or
Yeah, I think they became feeling Spanish quite early on. That's
yeah.
quite a while ago since that
Hmm.
started
Hmm.
happening. I would say that maybe when they were around 15.
Yeah.
I think that's when it started, because then they were out socializing a lot more as well with their friends and things. I
Yeah.
actually asked my eldest daughter last night, even I said to her, what do you prefer speaking? Because we always mix loads in our house, so we never really know what language we're speaking. But I asked her what language she preferred speaking in, and she Spanish without a doubt.
Yes. Even with you, so because that was going to be my
Even
next
with me.
question. So clearly they never felt Swedish in this whole
No.
growing up.
And the funny part of the twist of the story is that what are they nationality wise? Well, they are Swedish.
Yeah. So do they have other passports as well, or do they
No,
just have a Swedish one? Oh,
they
that's
only have
yeah.
Swedish nationality, which is quite funny then when you
That
don't
must be
feel it.
quite confusing for someone to hold up a Swedish passport and not actually feel that interesting. But again, also it just, to me, it's always like it's a passport. It doesn't tell anything about who you are really. It's just it's a document that allows you to travel or not.
Or not.
And
There's a lot of Brits searching for their Irish ancestors and very Irish passports, wasn't there at one point?
absolutely makes sense to have, if you have the option to go for
Mm.
the European passport.
Global citizens, for sure.
So you spoke Swedish with them growing up, because I mean, as we talking before this conversation today, language is your big passion, and we'll come to talk about what it is you do as well. But so you spoke Swedish with them, and then English was the
As much
family
as I
language.
could.
Yeah,
I am going to fully admit that I wasn't consistent, and I didn't do it all the time.
yeah. And you had three languages to deal with. I mean, we never had the third language really infiltrating home, because we were always in an English speaking environment, even though British and American English are quite different. And the kids would actually
Mm.
switch, which was that's another, it's like, aha, that was so interesting, because you kind of think, oh well, it's English, English, but they would switch as soon as they came home. They would switch to British English, and then at school, especially one of the kids was completely American outside of the house.
Mm.
So she
Yeah.
treated it like a foreign language.
Two different languages. Yeah. Yeah.
And we hadn't
Which
even
is not,
realized. Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. So I did my best. We always went to Sweden every summer. I had my family
Yeah.
there, so we
Yeah.
spent a good few weeks every summer. They were exposed to a lot of Swedish, but I could have been better at speaking Swedish to them at home. But that's also because I am quite fluid in my languages, so I don't always necessarily think about what language I speak in.
Mhm.
So if I speak to my child and she answers me back in English, I'll glide into English without even
Yeah.
thinking about it. So I start off in Swedish, and then before I know it, we're speaking English because she preferred to use that language. So it's hard. It's so much harder than you think, because the theory
Absolutely.
is that one person, one language, if you're going to have different languages in a family. But
Yeah.
it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah. I love that you're saying that, because that is very often the misconception, where people are like, oh, with if you speak another language, they'll just pick it up. And it's just nothing like that in my experience. And I mean, I spoke German with them also most of the time, but not all of the time. And same as you, I was quite happy. And also I quite enjoyed speaking English with my kids as well, because it, like, the language and the songs and all the games that were played, and I was happy to absorb all that as well. And I didn't want to impose and be so strict with myself in that, speaking to them. It didn't feel right. I had German friends, who were very much like, just like basically saying, I can't understand what you're saying if you're not speaking the language. And that was so alien to me.
Yeah.
And so how are your
There are,
children
there are,
now speaking Swedish? How do they feel now?
yeah, I mean, they can speak Swedish, both of them. The younger is probably a little bit less than the older one because the older one went to Sweden and tried to live there.
Oh yeah.
But I did do something that I think helped as well when they were, I can't remember how old they were then, but they were quite young still. And because Sweden has this, and I think Germany has that as well, that you can start like a school for expat children and you get like a bit of money from them to help you run that. So I did that here. I just had two Swedish friends here. They both had two children. I had two children. And the minimum to have was six children. So I just counted. Obviously, we have six children. We can do it.
Excellent. Yeah.
So we started this extra curriculum Swedish school in the afternoons, and I ran that for 8 years here. So we did have other children as well in the end. But I did it mainly because I wanted to do some more structural teaching towards my own children. So they didn't particularly like it because it was an extra school hour or so.
Obviously, yeah.
But they did take part until they got so old that they could kind of refuse.
Yeah. No, I think it's such a lovely thing to give them, because I always feel like as soon as there's other children and other people speaking the language, the non-dominant language to them, it's such a relief, because you kind of feel like it's not all on you. There's a need for them to speak it that you don't necessarily provide, because clearly you could speak the other languages as well. And then so they can get lazy and sloppy, and like we all do. And it's just nice to have that little extra support.
That is actually something that is so important, and something that I think, because I'm quite sort of, I feel for all the parents who are struggling out there with giving their mother tongue to their children, because it isn't as easy as it looks. And you have the hardcore gang on one side saying you should do this and you should do that. And then if you fail on that area, you start feeling really guilty and you feel embarrassed that you haven't been able to make your children fluent in your own language. But I also think that children learn, even if they don't want to show that they learn. So they still do learn subconsciously. So it's there for whenever they want to focus on it again, and then they can refine it and make it better. But also they use it based on need, definitely. So if, like you say, with your mom, you know that she can speak the other language as well, whatever that language is. So you don't have to speak her language. But if you have a grandparent, or like my best friend in Sweden, her daughter became best friends with my daughter. And obviously when she was little, she couldn't speak English. So Charlie was more forced to try and use her Swedish instead. And then it turns out I always get really surprised when we go to Sweden and I hear them have long conversations with my friends. And I'm going, you can speak Swedish. And they're like, well, why wouldn't I be able to speak Swedish? I'm like, I suppose. It's just that I don't get to hear it very often.
I feel the same sometimes. And we went through phases, certainly, where they would speak less German with me, or basically no German, especially one of my kids. Just that was, so we would speak English, and I was much more interested in our relationship, in terms of, I just didn't want to enforce something that she wasn't happy to do, and as long as I could listen to her speak German with my parents or other people, I was fine. It's okay, and it's there somewhere at the back of her mind, and she can dig it up again when she needs to. And that's exactly what happened. And now they're also in their 20s, and they constantly, when they meet Germans in their international lives, they are so happy to speak German. And then I'll think, maybe it was enough, and all those moments where you're like, oh my God.
I think we can pat ourselves on the shoulder and say, we've done well. We've done all right, actually. We've done all right.
Yeah. But it's just, I love it. And I could never, I know it's so hard to pass on a language, and it takes so many hours. Actually, I looked this up. You need to be actively immersed in the other language for a good 25 hours a week. So for a child, that's roughly 30% of their waking hours. That's a lot if you think about them being at school and exposed to another language, and then sports and friends and all of that. It really takes a lot of effort. And for a family with both parents working full time and activities at the weekend, and it's really, really hard to make that happen. without external help. At the same time, I could never understand those who just completely gave up and didn't even try. Because I always feel like there is something when you speak your mother tongue, there is something when you speak to your children or you sing songs with them or something that goes beyond the language. That is something that is just in you. And so for me, it's always, I would have missed, reading my favorite childhood stories to my kids. That was something I really wanted to give them. And it was just like almost like a physical need to do that. And so I never really understand when people just didn't even bother.
No, it's hard for me to understand as well. But at the same time, I don't want to judge them because they will have whatever reasons they have.
Absolutely. And and like I said earlier, it's like the amount of time you have to invest. It's a huge burden on a family. And then there's stigma with languages, and
sometimes it comes from the partner, because I would say, for example, British people aren't used to people speaking many languages, so they don't see the need. I was told many times from my ex-mother-in-law saying about like, but it's too many languages for her. She can't learn all that, She's got Spanish as well. Obviously, she needs to learn that first.
Oh, it's confusing for them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing for them and all of that. So, and if you're young as a mother, you might be influenced a lot more by that than if you're an older and more secure person, because you don't want to disrupt the family sort of thing.
Absolutely, because and again, this is like where you as a woman, and I feel sometimes our generation, we were so keen to accommodate everyone, making sure everybody's happy. So sometimes you would just put your needs or wishes maybe last, because you just felt like in the greater scheme of things, you wanted to make sure family harmony is there. Yeah. And it's so true. And I was like, I noticed with us, so my children were born in the UK, and we'd see my parents-in-law a lot, and we would always speak English exclusively around them. And so they hardly ever heard me speak German with the children. They knew theoretically that I was speaking German with them, and they loved that. They were very proud of the fact that their grandchildren could speak another language, but it wasn't a reality for them. And then when we moved to the US and they came to visit, I had got used to speaking much more German with them, because in the US as well, there's a lot less, you don't get the looks when you speak German in public. In the US, I felt much more relaxed about that. People were much more positive when they heard me speak German with them in public. And so I got used to that. And then when my in-laws came to visit, it was probably a bit jarring for them to all of a sudden hear me speak German with the kids, and they felt excluded because they just weren't used to it. And that was something to kind of get my head around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the feeling excluded is the core of that, where people might end up not doing it because they're afraid that their partner is going to feel excluded. They're afraid that the rest of the extended family is going to feel excluded. They might feel embarrassed in at the school drop off. If you speak whatever minority language, they're going to point it out to them that they're different and stuff like that. There's so many psychological factors in this as well.
Oh, totally. And then I guess it's because you could just say, well, then they should just learn a language. Why don't they? And so for someone, I mean, I've always felt like that. It's like if I feel like, oh my God, I can't understand what anyone's saying, my reaction is not to say, oh, they should speak my language because I feel excluded and I don't like it. My reaction would always be like, oh my God, I better learn this. I better get at least I learn a few things, a few words, a few phrases to feel more part of it. But that is me. And that's I studied languages. I had the interest from like when I first listened to English songs and I wanted to know what they meant. And that was, age 11. I was just like, I love languages. I want to do it. But I have to accept that not everybody feels that way. And so again, you can't judge people.
Interesting that you bring up the personality part of it as well, because I'll tell you an interesting story now. A few years ago, I was teaching Swedish, because I do a bit of teaching Swedish still here and there, like online or privately. And there are a few people here in Lanzarote that might have Swedish ancestry and they would like to learn that language. So, or they've had a family member move to Sweden for work and they want to learn the language. So I've done a few private classes. And the one woman who I was teaching, she had a Swedish mother, although she was born here as well. Same as my children then. So one Swedish parent and one Spanish parent in their case. There was 2 daughters. The girl or the woman who I was teaching, she had taken upon herself, her mother didn't speak Swedish when they were little. She knew she had a Swedish mother, obviously, so she was interested in it, and she took it upon herself to learn Swedish.
Yeah.
And she was brilliant. She was almost fluent when I started working with her, and she's definitely fluent now. Her sister, on the other hand, can't speak a word of Swedish.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And for me, it was always, I can't understand why you wouldn't want to learn something. And the sounds and everything. But I know people the same way, and people struggling. I've struggled with numbers, like I said earlier, and maths my whole life. It's terrible. It's not, I freeze when I have to, do anything mathematical. And so I have to just understand that some people feel like that about languages, and it makes them, they don't want to open their mouths, they don't want to, and so I've become a lot more like, well, I can't, it's learn the language. It's not as easy or as accessible.
Definitely not for everybody. No.
And it's for someone like me, I always feel like language is the key to a culture and a country and a people, to understand and to get the nuances. But I know that is not everyone is like that. And
but that's now you brought up the culture. I think that even if you're not super successful in the language part when the children are young, I think it's equally important, if not even more important, that you transfer your culture's traditions and information about where you're coming from, your heritage, basically. So we've always celebrated, Easter is quite big in Sweden. We celebrate Easter with all the bloody feathers and bloody flames.
Oh, you can absolutely swear.
If not, you have to edit it out. Swedish Christmas, which is different to English Christmas and Spanish Christmas, because they're also, we've had to, always when they were little, we had 3 Christmases, because we had to have Swedish on the 24th, and then English on the 25th, and then Spanish on the 6th of January.
Yeah, but that's lovely. And why not? There are never enough celebrations. Yeah, we've adopted all sorts of American things as well into our calendars. And I think it's just it's rich and colorful and wonderful. And
that's what I like the most, that it doesn't have to be read like from one culture to another, or from one language to another. We mix cultures, we mix languages. I mean, we have certain Spanish words that we always use for, like, hairband. We always use the Spanish word for hairband within our family, regardless of what language we're speaking. That word will be in Spanish.
Yeah.
Because it's just stuck, because it's such a good word for what it is, because hairband can be slightly different things, but a coleta is a coleta,
And that's the beauty of creating this multicultural family life, because I think it is special, and that's where the going to or sending the kids to some sort of school environment where there's other kids with the same traditions is so important. Because I remember being in the UK and kind of thinking, we were going to celebrate St. Nicholas Day, so they're going to put their shoes out, and overnight St. Nicholas brings something, but none of their friends were doing it, so they weren't particularly interested in doing it. At some point, it's just like, why? It's kind of weird. But as soon as you have other people who have the same tradition, or you have very open-minded and very culturally interested local friends who are like, oh, we want to do this too. That's how I
got my Swedish Christmases done, is because all my British friends loved my Swedish Christmases, so we could have a proper Swedish Christmas with them, which was great.
And it just opens up people's minds to to just embrace other traditions and other customs, and I love it. So it's being, in a way, you're kind of like a little ambassador wherever you are, in whatever country you live in, and when you can make
absolutely.
your children little ambassadors too, it's lovely. And I'm just thinking back to like multicultural day at school, and children turning up in local costumes and things like that. And it's just that sense of being part of a bigger community. It's just
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah,
And
I agree.
sharing that, and sharing the foods, and all that kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
just, yeah, and I look at sometimes my kids now, when they cook something, or they talk about a recipe, or they ask my mum in Germany for a recipe for something, and I just to cook for their maybe American friends in Britain.
Mm.
It becomes this greater thing, and I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, I do. And I know I'm always very happy when one of my girls asks me for, either for the recipe or for can you make it, that, and they come up with this Swedish name on a dish that is typically Swedish, and I'm going, oh, you like that then?
Yeah.
It warms the mother's heart.
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
did say to them, actually, not that long ago, I did say to them while we were sat around the table, Swedish people are a bit sort of weird as well, because we have a funny sense of humor and we're a bit morbid. So I said, so I said to them, I said, because we were eating one of our traditional dishes, and it's a recipe that comes from my grandmother originally.
mhm.
So it's not even sort of easy to find it online. And I said to them, just remember that now is soon the time to start writing these recipes down and ask me for them properly, because when I'm dead, you're not going to be able to recreate these dishes if you don't know how to make them. And they're like, you're not going to die yet, mum. I'm like, but you're not very quick either. So I thought I'll start saying it now.
Yeah, I just wish everybody could have a little bit more access to the diversity, I guess, that comes with growing up in a multicultural household. And
Mm,
unfortunately, in not that I want to become political, but in this current climate, it seems so much harder for people to
mm,
to celebrate themselves and their
mm.
own traditions and things. And it's this easy for us to talk because we're white Europeans, so we can bring our traditions anywhere, and people will be like, "Oh, that's
Exactly.
interesting." And if we were a different nationality or skin color, it might not be looked upon as positively.
No,
And
no,
so and I'm
no.
very aware of that. So
Mm. Another interesting, I do apologize if I'm kind of going away from what you were talking now, but it's something that came in my head because when I moved abroad, and probably a few years into having lived abroad, my friends were always asking me, like, how long are you going to stay there? Or when are you going to move back? Or are you going to move back? Are you going to live there forever now? There was all those questions. And I was like, I used to just turn back at them and said, are you going to stay in Sweden for the rest of your life? And because obviously, who knows? but
yeah,
but for them, that was just such a stupid question because, like, of course they are. But at the same time, we were always saying, "Oh, lucky you who live in a warm climate," and blah blah blah. I said, "Well, you can do it as
you
well." Oh
yes.
no, I
Oh,
couldn't. Well, why couldn't
yeah,
you? I
yeah,
did it. I didn't have nothing when I came here.
yeah,
So and I
yeah.
was pregnant, so it was like I had to fix something happening quite quickly.
But I think there's mindset. I just had a conversation last week with someone who said, "Oh God, I could never do what you do. Or I could never have done this." And I always think, well, why not? You know, but I just think there is something well, there are situations in life where you make decisions that they you might not have made had you been in a different frame of mind at
No,
the time, and then your life takes a completely different course.
yeah.
Sometimes that just doesn't happen. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I've always been solution orientated. So for me, it was a solution to a problem. I didn't feel very well in my environment. I needed to do
Yeah,
something to quickly get out of that feeling because I didn't want to spend years being, sick because of stress. And I couldn't really see any other solution than leave here from here,
yeah,
find something else, create another environment for yourself. So that was the solution. But I also give huge credit to my mother, actually, for showing me as a role model that you can be brave and do things that maybe is not the norm or what's
Mhm.
expected of you. And I've lived with that. You know, she was a single mum as well, and I grew up as an only child, even if I have three brothers, with her on my own. And she was a very strong woman. So was my grandmother, and so was my aunt. So I grew up in a matriarch family, kind of. And always, I mean, she wanted to move abroad loads when I was younger, and we
Yeah.
even did. When I was 9, she uprooted me and moved to Gran Canaria, which is my neighboring island now, which is so weird. So I
Oh,
think I kind of
wow.
closed the circle.
That's
But I
amazing.
hated it when I was 9. I hated it. And all I wanted was to go back home because I was in that age, you know.
How long did you go for?
Well, she had a contract for 3 years for the Swedish school because she was a teacher. So she got a job at the Swedish school in Gran Canaria, and she had a 3-year contract, but she broke it after 2 because she got fed up with me nagging to go home.
Okay.
So
Oh
we went
no.
home. We were there for 2 years.
So so
Yeah.
you
And she
basically
never let
you
me regret it. Once I moved to Lanzarote, she was like, "Excuse me," because she loved living in Gran
so
Canaria.
you
You know,
kind
she
of
was at the prime of,
carried on her kind of legacy
yeah,
in a
her
way.
legacy kind of way, yeah. But not to her happiness, I don't think, because
That
she was
yeah, that's kind
quite
of,
much older then
I
when
guess that's
I
a bit of
moved,
a
so she couldn't have.
punch in the stomach.
Exactly, yeah, I
Oh
know. I was like,
no. Yeah.
sorry, but she
Yeah.
said, you didn't like it. I said, yeah, but I'm older now, a lot older, you know, I'm 30 now.
Yeah.
You know, I was 9 at the time.
9 is so tough because that's when you
Mm,
really you have your friends and you're starting to be a little bit more independent from home, and you
mm.
probably that's probably the time where you feel most like you've got your friends and everything, your life is good.
It is a tough age. I didn't actually have any friends. I was that kind of child. I didn't have any friends. I was extremely shy when I was a child. You wouldn't think it now, but I was. I was like really, really shy. But I had my pet rabbit, which I had to give away, and I had a piano, which we had to sell, and I had my grandmother who lived with us, or very, very near us. She
Yeah.
more or less lived with us.
Yeah.
So those three things to give them up at the same
Yeah.
time, that was too hard for me. And also my brother, my older brother,
Mm.
who used to come and see us at the weekend. So even if we didn't grow up together, he was there every weekend. So, you know, I was used to having him around as well. And all of a sudden, none of those people was going to be there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so tough. But again, it shows how moving, uprooting the family is a really big thing, and it's really hard. It's really brave.
Mm.
There is never the best time. There is never with children, I think. And then sometimes, I mean, now you appreciate it now, what that must have been for her, that kind of hope to get out of her environment and start fresh. And then, oh, that's a tough one because
Yeah.
it does take a lot of courage and positive
I have found
mindset.
out
Yeah.
after she passed a few years ago now, and I found some letters and things. I think she ran away from a broken heart, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
She had had a relationship for quite some time that didn't quite work
And then
out. And based on what I've read in those letters, it was like him writing something. You put that much distance between us. I get the point, sort of thing.
but so you couldn't ask her about it then kind of later on. Oh
No.
wow. I mean,
I knew about the man. I
yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
met him loads when I was a kid as
Yeah.
well. But I didn't know that it last. I thought it finished a long earlier than that. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that it actually went on until we moved away.
Yeah.
So that was quite an incident.
Sometimes we don't understand situations until we are much older ourselves, and things that our parents have done or haven't done. Um, you know.
Yeah.
So when you went to Lanzarote, what was your mum's? Did she come and visit?
She did in the beginning, yeah. The first few years she did. She was still obviously working then, so she had whatever holidays, and then the summer she came. She came for a couple of weeks, and she was always talking about that. Oh, I'm going to move to you
Yeah. Yeah.
as
Yeah. Yeah.
well eventually when I retire. But she obviously lived with my grandmother, who was older. And then by the time my mum
Yeah.
started getting to the age where she could think about retirement, it was
Yeah.
always like, well, I can't leave your grandma behind. So I can't go until she's no longer here. And she was a strong woman. She lived forever. And then, and then by the time she was free of my grandmother,
Yeah.
um, she was starting to lose her own health slightly, and it wasn't. She came out actually. She was here 3 months,
Yeah.
the year after my grandmother had passed, and she was going to test to live here. But we had a terrible weather that winter, and it just rained, and the houses are not built for that, so they flooded, and she was just like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. She said, at my age now, I need my comforts, you know.
Oh wow. That's quite the story though. I feel like my heart is breaking for everyone a little bit because it's, you know, you only
Yeah, but
oh,
it's
it's
also
just
so interesting. Like you say, you don't always understand. I think in a way she planted a seed in me that, yes, you
yeah,
can move abroad like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I hated it because in hindsight, I could have thought to myself, well, 3 years, for God's sake, what is that? I could have just stayed there for 3 years and let her have had that experience. But when you're 9, 3 years is a long time.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
even 2 years
It's
was a long time for me, I thought.
and also
So
when you're
and
9, you haven't learned yet to um people please or to
no,
kind of accommodate others. You're much more likely to say what you think.
yes,
And then it's you haven't lost that ability yet because that
no,
comes later where you're trying to accommodate everyone,
yeah,
like you said, looking
yeah,
after
yeah, yeah, exactly.
after parents and grandparents and making
Yeah,
sure that everyone else is okay. But at 9 you're
yeah,
just like, I don't like it, and you don't care. You just
exactly. But I also think it is what brought me to think that I didn't want to uproot my own children at a
mm,
certain or
yes,
after a certain age, because I knew how it had
yep,
affected myself.
yep,
So either you do it earlier when they're too little to kind of react and they just
hmm,
adapt really easily to the new environment, or you kind of have to wait
yeah.
until they're much older.
Although again, from own experience, there is no good time or right time. And then you, if you have more than one child, then it might be the right time for one, but not the other. And so in a way, it's like you can't ever get it right. You're always going to be, and as a parent, you always, that's they're always going to blame you for whatever
Yeah,
it is, and you have to deal with it and hope that one
yeah,
day they'll understand.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Hopefully.
sometimes it's unless you're just not, it's not, maybe the desire is not as strong in you to go and do something, because I think
I think a lot of
there
people,
is.
if we go back to what your friends say, I don't actually think their urge or their want, their need to actually move abroad is that big, because they
Mhm.
do like what they have at home. You know, a lot of people have
Yeah,
quite high quality of life in those countries that we come from. You
yeah,
know, the standard
yeah,
of living is good. You know, I've had to sacrifice loads. You know, I still live with like having no tap water one day a week here where I live in my little village, because they don't have any groundwater. So they have
hmm,
to make the water from the sea. So desalination plants, and they can't make it quick enough, so they turn off
yeah,
our water once a week. So on a Thursday, I know that there's no showers, there's no washing up, there's hardly flushing the toilet, you know.
yeah,
So, and I don't think many of my friends could consider living under those circumstances, actually.
yeah, yeah. Everyone's different, and unfortunately, we only have the
Yeah,
one life to try something, and sometimes
exactly.
it's like, well, you just I just always feel like you have to make your decisions, and yet then you have to follow through. You can't go and see like, oh, I wish I'd done that or this or
No.
it's just and with the children it's the same. I felt so guilty so many times for whatever mental health challenges they had, and thinking, oh, I should have done this differently, or I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have pushed for it. What if? And then you can't live like that. And
No,
actually,
no, you can't.
the resilience that comes with the challenges is also something very positive.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. And also you have to kind of just accept the decisions that you've made yourself, and be a little bit
at
kind
the
to
time,
yourself as well. I'm
yes,
all for
yeah,
that. Be kind to yourself, because don't beat yourself up. Not every decision maybe was the
yeah,
right one, but you have probably found a way around it, or done another change later on which might counteract slightly
yep.
for one bad mistake or one bad decision.
We're doing it all
Um,
for the first time, you know.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
This is it.
yeah,
Everything we do, we were doing it for the first time when we do
yeah,
something new.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like starting a business, for example, when you turned 50, that wasn't in my plan, for example.
Yeah, let's talk before we get to the end. Let's talk a little bit about that. Just if you want to.
Yeah. So I started my business 5 years ago. I'm a trilingual, as I do speak 3 languages, virtual assistant. So I help a lot of other expat business owners, mostly expat business owners, but also, people in Sweden who are Swedish and in Spain that are Spanish, with their businesses. So I just like an administrative second pair of hands, basically, to do stuff. So that's what I do. And I thought it was a good idea to use the fact that I have 3 languages, because it's always nice to be able to use the skills that you have.
Yeah.
I have worked in corporate administratively also for many years. And I have obviously an insight in how it is being an expat myself, which helps as well. And then I have other, obviously, things with me in this, which is my degree in psychology and communication, which I also think helps a lot in running a business.
You're combining all your skills now; they all come together, and you can utilize everything. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and that's a story in itself, because I've always, since I was young, I've always said, because my brother always had his own business, I said, that's not for me. I'm never going to be an entrepreneur. That is not for me. I like being employed. I like to know where my paycheck is coming from. I need to know I have my holidays paid, etc., etc. And then when this pandemic happened, and Spain was quite badly affected in the way that they locked down completely. So tourism died. We had nothing to make money on, and everybody had to kind of reinvent themselves. And the people who were able to reinvent themselves were the ones who are still here and from the foreigners who live here, were the ones who could stay, because a lot of people left. And I just came across this thing, virtual assistant. What is that? Okay, administration online. Yeah, okay, well, I can do that, and that's just how it started. And now, in hindsight, I'm thinking, why didn't I do this years ago? But then again, there's no point thinking that, because
no, you weren't ready.
It wasn't the time. I wasn't ready. The world wasn't ready for me. I don't know. It was just not the right time. And apparently 5 years ago, it was the right time. And it has been going, really well, actually, since the start, which I'm ever so grateful for. One of my biggest clients is actually an online Swedish school now called Association of Swedish Beyond Borders. So it just really ties the loop of what we've been talking about, because now I get to work with all those parents who are struggling. They live wherever they live. They live everywhere in the world. We have about, 250 students, pupils every year that enroll in this online school, all ages from 7 to 18 to 20 even, I think, because we keep developing new courses. All qualified teachers, Swedish teachers, who also live all over the world. We have a teacher in Argentina, we have one in Texas, we have one in Canada, we have one in Paris, so, and I'm the administrator of this.
That's great, because you've been them, you know exactly what it's like. So fantastic. Louise, we have to come to an end. I've got 2 more little questions for you to wrap up. One is, are you learning anything? Are you learning anything new?
I'm always learning something.
Why does that not surprise me?
Well, exactly. That's it. At the moment, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about AI, actually, and how that is, that can be used for both business-wise, but also, in your personal life. So I'm trying to learn that. I am constantly reading books, and I'm learning how to write a book. So I thought I'd join you. You've written a book. I'm going to write a book now.
Oh, fantastic. What kind of book? Do you know? Have you?
Well, it's a bit of the psychology behind maybe starting and running a business. So it's not like how you start a business. It's more like what happens with you in your head.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I just, there's so many books on how to do things externally. But the actual internal journey,
is it? And you're not prepared for the different psychological stages that you're going to be going through, So I'm going to...
that sounds fascinating.
I thought for once I'm going to actually use my knowledge of psychology and use it in a productive way.
Sounds good. And then one very last question. is there anything that makes you laugh every day, whenever you see it, whenever it comes, just something lighthearted that cheers you up?
Oh, I don't know. I like not silly jokes, but I like jokes. But they have to be, like my type of humor, which is, a bit dry and sarcastic and ironic. I love irony. But in general, I'm quite a happy person, as you might have noticed. It doesn't come hard for me to laugh at things, and I quite often laugh at myself, to be honest with you, because I think sometimes I'm just a bit crazy.
So that's the best way. You know what? Let's keep it that way. Thank you so much for this conversation, Louise.
Thank you.
So much positive energy. It's quite contagious. Even through the screen, Louise really had an energizing effect on me. And when I sat down to edit the episode, I could feel it all again. A life well lived, I would say, and it shows. If you want to connect with Louise or maybe hire her for a project, you can find her on LinkedIn, Louise Sverud, on her website, or on Instagram. And all the links are in the show notes, of course. I can't wait to hear more about Louise's book project. If you've listened to me for a while, you know how interested I am in psychology and what happens when we put ourselves through a whole lot of living. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for Louise to write her book, hint, hint, you can read mine. Transcontinental Overload, a memoir of movement, meltdowns, and making a life in between, is widely available on your favorite booksellers' websites, or you can order it from your local store. You could get it as a paperback or an ebook. I've put the ISBN numbers in the show notes if you need them. And I'm currently working on the audio version and also the German edition. I'm not making any promises in terms of a date, but hopefully it won't take much longer until those are available as well. If you have read the book already, please, please, please leave a review. Whether on Amazon or Bookshop or Goodreads, wherever, it doesn't matter. It will really help increase the book's visibility. And of course, share it with friends. Spread the word, buy it as a gift. That would be much appreciated. And that is it for today. I'm heading out now into the spring sunshine with my dog. Winter has finally said goodbye, even up here in the northeast of the United States, and I'm going to make the most of it. So take care and see you next time.